My wedding dress still smelled like roses and champagne when he said it. The grand ballroom of the Savannah Heritage Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the faces of 120 guests, our families, friends, colleagues, and Tyler's powerful father. My heart was so full that evening, overflowing with joy and promise, completely unaware of the humiliation that was about to unfold. I remember catching my reflection in one of the ornate mirrors that lined the ballroom walls. The ivory lace of my gown caught the light just so, and for a moment, I hardly recognized myself. Carrie Williams, now Carrie Brooks, a small-town girl who'd worked her way through college, built a career helping others at a local housing nonprofit, and somehow caught the eye of Tyler Brooks, heir to the Brooks and Sons construction empire. The champagne flowed freely as dinner concluded. The band was setting up, and soon we'd have our first dance. That's when Tyler stood, tapping his crystal flute with a silver spoon. The room quieted, and all eyes turned to my new husband. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced, his voice carrying across the ballroom. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, something I'd grown used to dismissing. "To my beautiful bride." Guests raised their glasses. My sister Abby squeezed my hand under the table. "You know," Tyler continued, swirling his champagne, "when I first met Carrie, she was living in that tiny apartment in the East Side." Chuckles rippled through the crowd. "But look at her now." I shifted uncomfortably. There was nothing wrong with my old neighborhood. "Well, at least after the honeymoon, she'll finally have to get her own place," he smirked. "No more freeloading at my condo, right?" The laughter from some guests was hesitant. Others froze. I heard the clink of a dropped fork. My smile faltered. I blinked, unable to process what I'd just heard. The weight of my gown suddenly felt suffocating. My veil slipped slightly to the side as my hand trembled on the table. I turned to look at his father, Thomas Brooks, the imposing owner of Brooks and Sons Construction, expecting some reprimand. But he was chuckling, quietly, proudly. I looked at Abby in the front row. Her eyes were wide with shock. Rachel, my best friend and maid of honor, had already stood up, fury written across her face. "It's a joke, people," Tyler waved dismissively, noticing the tension. "My wife knows I love her, especially her cooking." Another wink. More uncomfortable murmurs. I hadn't just been humiliated. I'd been publicly discarded, before the cake was even cut. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. I smiled mechanically for photos. I danced when expected. I cut the cake with Tyler's hand firmly over mine, his grip a little too tight, his whisper in my ear. "Lighten up, babe." It was funny, but I saw it now. What Rachel had tried to warn me about for months. What my sister had gently suggested when she asked if I was really sure about Tyler. The mask had slipped, and underneath was a man who thought I was beneath him. A trophy he'd paid for and could disparage at will. When the last guests finally departed, Tyler was drunk. We stood alone in the hotel garden, the fairy lights casting shadows across his handsome face. "I meant it," he slurred, loosening his tie. "I married you because it looks good. You make me look grounded, but I'm not going to change my life for you. You'll live by my rules. My condo, my family, my name. Be grateful." Each word was a blow, knocking the air from my lungs. 6 years together, and this was how he really saw me, as an accessory, not a partner. "You're drunk," I said quietly, removing my veil. "And you're cruel." "I'm honest," he retorted, "and you knew what you were getting into. A Brooks man doesn't marry down without expectations." I stepped back, the gravel crunching under my satin heels. "I'm going to my sister's tonight." Tyler laughed. "Sure you are. And tomorrow you'll come crawling back because you have nowhere else to go. Face it, Carrie. You need me more than I need you." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked away, the train of my dress gathering dust from the garden path. I heard him call after me, his voice fading as I reached for my phone to call Rachel. 20 minutes later, she picked me up at the hotel entrance, my small overnight bag hastily packed. "I knew it," she said, helping me into her car, careful with my dress. "I knew he'd show his true colors eventually." "I was so blind," I whispered, watching the hotel and my marriage recede in the side mirror. That night, I slept on Rachel's couch. My wedding dress hung carefully in her closet. I cried until there were no tears left, wondering how I'd missed the signs. Or perhaps I'd seen them all, along but chosen to ignore them, seduced by the promise of security, of belonging to someone who seemed so confident about his place in the world. By morning, my phone was exploding with texts. From Abby, from Tyler's mother, even from Thomas. "Where are you?" Don't make this worse than it already is. I silenced it, sipping the coffee Rachel had made, trying to figure out what to do next. I had savings. Not much, but enough to start over. I had my job. I had my dignity, or what was left of it. And then, at precisely 9:17 a.m., as the Savannah sun streamed through Rachel's apartment windows, someone banged on the door. Rachel peered through the peephole and turned to me, her expression unreadable. "It's Tyler." I hesitated, then nodded. She opened the door to reveal my husband of less than 24 hours. His face was pale, his tie undone, eyes wide with desperation. "Carrie," he gasped, his polished demeanor completely shattered. "Please. I messed up. Everything's falling apart. I need your help." Behind him, on Rachel's small TV, a news report was playing. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Breaking Brooks and Sons Construction under federal investigation for fraud." And suddenly, I understood exactly why Tyler Brooks, the man who had torn me down on what should have been the most important day of my life, was crawling back the very next morning. I stared at Tyler, standing in Rachel's doorway, his designer suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. For a man who spent $300 on haircuts, he looked remarkably disheveled. Part of me, a small, vindictive part I hardly recognized, felt satisfaction seeing him so undone. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Rachel shot me a look that clearly said, "Absolutely not." But curiosity got the better of me. "5 minutes," I said, stepping aside. Tyler entered. His shoulders slumped. The news on the television continued reporting on Brooks and Sons construction. Words like federal, investigation, wire fraud, and potential charges floated through the air. "Turn it off," Tyler snapped at Rachel, who responded by turning the volume up instead. "Sources indicate Thomas Brooks, CEO of the company, is the primary target of the investigation, though other executives may also face charges," the reporter stated calmly. "All company assets have been temporarily frozen pending further investigation." I sank into Rachel's armchair, suddenly understanding the full picture. "So that's why you're here." Tyler paced the small living room, running his hands through his hair. "Dad's lawyers say it's a misunderstanding, but the feds showed up at the estate this morning. They've frozen everything. The company accounts, personal accounts, properties under the Brooks name." He looked at me, desperation evident. "My cards don't work. The honeymoon flight's been canceled. The condo, they've seized it, Carrie. And now you have nowhere to go." I finished for him. "No money, no home." He nodded, his face flushing with what might have been shame, though I couldn't be sure. "Just me," I added quietly. The woman he'd publicly humiliated less than 12 hours ago. The woman he'd accused of freeloading. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rachel snorted. "You've got to be kidding me. After what you said to her last night? After treating her like some charity case you generously took in?" Tyler ignored her, focusing solely on me. "I know I messed up. What I said at the reception was inexcusable. I was nervous, trying to impress Dad. You know how he is." "No, Tyler," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I know how you are. Last night wasn't a mistake. It was a revelation. You showed me exactly what you think of me." He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. "That's not true. I love you." "You love what I represent," I corrected him. "The caring social worker who makes you look good to your friends. The devoted girlfriend who supported you through school. The wife who wouldn't sign a prenup because she trusted you completely." Tyler's head snapped up. "The prenup. That's it." His eyes brightened with realization. "We're married now. What's mine is yours. But more importantly, what's yours is mine. They can't touch your accounts, your assets." Rachel made a disgusted sound. "Are you seriously suggesting that Carrie should support you now? After you've spent years making her feel small for not contributing equally to your lifestyle?" But Tyler was on a roll, desperation fueling his thoughts. "You have savings, right? And your job. It's not much, but it's something. We could rent a place, something modest until this blows over. Dad's lawyers say it might take months, but they'll clear his name." I stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time. This man, who had swept me off my feet 6 years ago with his charm and confidence, was now calculating how to use me as a financial safety net. "Tyler," I said softly, "do you remember what you said to me last night in the garden? About how I'd live by your rules?" He waved dismissively. "I was drunk. You know I didn't mean it." "But you did." I stood up, a strange calm settling over me. Rachel, can you give us a minute? She hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave me alone with him. I'll be right in the kitchen if you need me, she said pointedly, shooting Tyler a warning glance before stepping out. Once she was gone, I went to my overnight bag and pulled out a manila folder. What's that? Tyler asked, eyeing it suspiciously. An emergency exit plan, I replied, opening it on the coffee table. Inside were copies of all my finances, application forms for a small studio apartment I'd been considering, and a list of resources Rachel had helped me compile over the past month as my doubts about the marriage had grown. But most importantly, there was a document, the marriage certificate that we'd signed yesterday, with one crucial difference. I never filed it, I said, quietly, watching his face as understanding dawned. After what happened last night, I decided not to. There is no legal marriage, Tyler. It hasn't been registered with the county. The color drained from his face. You're lying. I wish I were, I said truthfully. I wish yesterday had been everything I'd dreamed about for the past year. I wish you had been the man I thought you were. He snatched the certificate, examining it closely, looking for proof that I was bluffing. Finding none, he crumpled it in his fist. You can't do this to me, not now. I'm not doing anything to you, I replied. Your father did this. And you never saw me as an equal. You never truly respected me or my work. You married me for image, not for love. That's not true, he insisted, but his protest lacked conviction. Isn't it? Then why did you humiliate me in front of everyone we know? Why did you only come here after your accounts were frozen? Tyler stood, approaching me with an intensity that made me step back. We can fix this. File the certificate. Be my wife. I need you, Carrie. The words I'd longed to hear for years. I need you. Now rang hollow. He needed what I could provide. Stability, shelter, financial support. Not me. Never me. No, I said firmly. You didn't marry me for love, and now that the money's gone, you want me to rescue you. But I already rescued myself. I spent the next week in a daze, alternating between numbing disbelief and sharp, clarifying anger. The news was everywhere. Thomas Brooks, pillar of Savannah society, indicted on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The family that had made me feel small was now spectacularly falling apart on national television. Rachel insisted I stay with her until I figured things out. Besides, she said one evening as we shared takeout Thai food, your place is already rented to someone else, and you said yourself the new studio won't be ready for another 2 weeks. I nodded, grateful for her generosity but eager to stand on my own again. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler had accused me of freeloading, yet here I was, temporarily without a home of my own. Have you heard from him? Rachel asked cautiously, pushing her pad thai around with her chopsticks. Every day, I sighed, showing her my phone with its 17 missed calls and dozens of unread texts. His tone has evolved, from demanding to pleading. And Thomas? I grimaced. His lawyer sent me a letter. Apparently they want to discuss my options regarding the marriage certificate. Rachel's eyes widened. They're trying to intimidate you into filing it, aren't they? I think so, but legally there's nothing they can do. We have up to 30 days to file in Georgia, and I'm well within my rights to choose not to. Still, Rachel cautioned, these people are desperate, and desperate people can be dangerous. She wasn't wrong. The following morning, as I arrived at work, I found Thomas Brooks himself waiting in the lobby of our modest nonprofit office. Ms. Williams, he said formally, as though we hadn't just shared a wedding reception days earlier. I'd like a word. My colleagues stared, clearly recognizing the man whose face had been plastered across every news outlet in town. I led him to a small conference room, my heart hammering, but my exterior calm. Mr. Brooks, I said evenly, I'm sorry about your legal troubles, but I don't see how I can help. His smile was thin and didn't reach his eyes. A family trait, apparently. Let's cut to the chase. You need to file that marriage certificate. And why would I do that? Because, he leaned forward, his expensive suit crinkling slightly, I can make things very difficult for you if you don't. I raised an eyebrow. More difficult than having my character publicly assassinated at my own wedding reception? That was unfortunate, he conceded without sincerity. Tyler was stressed, but he loves you. No, I said firmly. He doesn't, and we both know it. Thomas sighed, switching tactics. Carrie, be reasonable. Our family has influence in this town even now. Your little housing nonprofit. How many of your major donors are connected to Brooks and Sons? How many board members? The threat was clear. I felt a chill, realizing he was willing to damage an organization helping hundreds of families just to pressure me. You would hurt vulnerable people to save yourselves? I asked, genuinely shocked despite everything. I would do whatever necessary to protect my family, he replied coldly. Something you clearly don't understand. I studied him. This powerful man now brought low by his own greed, and felt an unexpected wave of pity. Mr. Brooks, I understand more than you think. I understand loyalty. I understand sacrifice. But I also understand self-respect. Self-respect won't pay your bills when you're blacklisted in this town, he countered. Standing, I gathered my composure. I'd rather be blacklisted than complicit. Please leave before I call security. His face hardened, but he rose. You're making a mistake. No, I replied. I'm finally correcting one. After he left, I sat alone in the conference room, trembling slightly. His threats weren't idle. The Brooks family did have connections throughout Savannah's philanthropic community. They could hurt our funding, maybe even my career. But I'd faced worse odds before. I grew up watching my single mother work 3 jobs after my father left. I'd worked my way through college without family money or connections. I knew how to survive. On determination alone. That evening, I called Abby. My younger sister had been worried sick, caught between concern for me and the awkwardness of having just attended my non-marriage. He actually threatened your job? She gasped when I relayed the encounter with Thomas. More or less, I confirmed. But I'm not filing that certificate, Abby. I can't tie myself legally to that family. Not after everything. I'm proud of you, she said softly. Mom would be too. The mention of our mother, gone 5 years now after a brief battle with cancer, brought tears to my eyes. I wish she were here. She would have seen through Tyler from the beginning. Maybe, Abby mused, but she also taught us to see the best in people. You didn't do anything wrong by believing in him, Carrie. Her words were a balm, easing the self-recrimination I'd been battling. I hadn't been foolish to hope, to believe in love. The foolishness lay in ignoring the warning signs, in compromising my worth for acceptance. The next day, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Diane Fletcher, one of our board members and a prominent realtor in Savannah. She requested a private meeting, and my stomach nodded, assuming Thomas had already begun making good on his threats. We met at a quiet cafe near the office. Diane, an elegant woman in her 60s with a reputation for blunt honesty, got straight to the point. Thomas Brooks came to see me yesterday, she stated, stirring her tea. He suggested we should reconsider our funding allocation to your housing initiative. My heart sank. Diane, She held up a hand. I told him to take his influence and shove it somewhere anatomically challenging. I nearly choked on my coffee. You did? Carrie. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. I've known the Brooks men for 30 years. Thomas built his fortune on the backs of others, and he raised Tyler to do the same. That stunt at your wedding? It confirmed everything I've thought about them for decades. Relief washed over me. So, the nonprofit is secure, she assured me. In fact, I've been making calls. Several of our major donors are distancing themselves from anything Brooks-related. If anything, your program might see increased funding as people try to demonstrate they're nothing like Thomas. For the first time in days, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Thank you, Diane. Don't thank me. You've earned this support through your work. She paused, considering me. You know, there's an opening for program director coming up next month. Angela is retiring. The board thinks you'd be an excellent candidate. I blinked in surprise. Really? But I've only been with the organization for 3 years. 3 years of exceptional work, she corrected. Plus, you've just demonstrated remarkable integrity under pressure. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need. As I walked back to the office, I felt something shift inside me. A realization that what Tyler had seen as my weakness, my dedication to charity work, as he dismissively called it, was actually my greatest strength. I had built a reputation based on character, not connections. On substance, not superficial charm. That evening, I finally responded to one of Tyler's texts. Please stop contacting me. It's over. His reply came instantly. You'll regret this when you're struggling to pay rent on your pathetic salary. I stared at the message, recognizing the desperate lashing out of a man who had lost all power. For a moment, I considered telling him about the potential. Promotion, about Diane's support, about how his father's threats had backfired. Instead, I blocked his number. Some victories are best celebrated in silence. 2 weeks later, I moved into my new studio apartment in a converted historic building downtown. It was small but charming, with exposed brick walls, tall windows that flooded the space with natural light, and just enough room for the essentials. Most importantly, it was mine. Paid for with my own salary, decorated to my own taste, a sanctuary untouched by the Brooks family influence. Rachel and Abby helped me move in, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs because the old freight elevator was temperamental at best. "I still think you should have let me help with the security deposit," Abby said, arranging books on a small shelf I'd found at a thrift store. At 24, my sister was still finding her way, working as a barista while taking night classes in social work. "No way," I replied firmly. "This place is my fresh start. I need to do it on my own." Rachel emerged from the tiny kitchenette with 3 glasses of wine. "To independence," she toasted, handing us each a glass. And to Carrie, who didn't just, dodge a bullet. She dodged a nuclear missile. We laughed, clinking glasses. The weight I'd been carrying since the wedding was gradually lifting. The nightmare of public humiliation was fading, replaced by a quiet determination to rebuild. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee in my secondhand French press, and sat by the window, watching Savannah come alive. The city felt different now. Less sea. Like Tyler's territory and more like a place where I could forge my own path. My phone rang, displaying the nonprofit's number. It was Angela, the current program director. "Carrie, I need you to come in early if possible," she said, her voice tense. "There's a situation with the Riverside housing development. The Riverside project was our largest initiative, affordable housing for lower income, families in a formerly industrial area being revitalized. We'd been working on it for over a year." "What's wrong?" I asked, already reaching for my keys. "The contractor just pulled out. Said they couldn't guarantee materials or timeline anymore." She sighed heavily. "Given everything with Brooks & Sons, I'm worried we're seeing ripple effects throughout the construction industry." My stomach tightened. The Brooks scandal was wider than I'd realized, affecting projects and people far beyond their immediate circle. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I arrived at the office, chaos reigned. Our small team huddled in the conference room, expressions ranging from worried to panicked. "We're already 6 weeks behind schedule," Marcus, our development coordinator, was saying. "If we have to find a new contractor and rebid the entire project, we could lose our funding window." Angela nodded grimly. "Not to mention the 37 families who are counting on moving in by fall." I slipped into a seat, quickly reviewing the documents scattered across the table. "What about Jimenez Construction? They handled the East Side project last year." "Already called," Angela replied. "They're at capacity until December." For the next 3 hours, we called every contractor in our network. The response was always the same. Either they were booked solid or they were tangled up in projects affected by the Brooks fallout and couldn't take on more work. Finally, as the team broke for lunch, I sat alone in the conference room, staring at the Riverside blueprints. These weren't just plans on paper. They represented stability for dozens of families, many with children, some escaping domestic violence or recovering from financial hardship. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see a man I didn't recognize. Tall, with dark hair streaked with gray at the temples, wearing worn jeans and a simple button-down shirt. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "I'm looking for Carrie Williams." "That's me," I replied, standing to shake his hand. "I'm Miguel Jimenez." He smiled, and I immediately connected the name to the construction company we'd just called. "My assistant mentioned your project is in trouble." I nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "Our contractor backed out this morning. The Brooks situation has everyone spooked." He made a sound of understanding. "Thomas Brooks cast a long shadow in this industry, not always a clean one." "You know him?" I asked cautiously. "Competed against him for 20 years," Miguel replied with a wry smile. "Often lost bids to him despite my lower estimates. The man had connections I couldn't match." I hesitated, wondering if he knew about my personal connection to the Brooks family. Savannah was a small city in many ways, and gossip traveled fast. "I heard about what happened at your wedding," he said gently, answering my unspoken question. "My wife and I know the Fletchers. Diane speaks very highly of you." I felt my cheeks warm. "It's been an interesting few weeks." "I can imagine." He nodded, then tapped the blueprints. "But I didn't come here to discuss gossip. I came because this project matters, and my company might be able to help." Hope sparked. But your assistant said you were booked until December. For commercial projects, yes. But we've always prioritized community housing. If you're willing to be flexible on some materials and timeline aspects, I think we could make it work. For the next hour, Miguel and I reviewed the plans, identifying where we could cut costs without compromising quality, adjusting schedules to accommodate his team's availability. By the time Angela returned from lunch, we had the outline of a viable solution. It won't be easy, Miguel cautioned as we wrapped up. We'll be working tight margins and tighter deadlines. But it's possible, Angela pressed. He nodded. With Ms. Williams coordinating? On your end, yes. She clearly knows these plans inside and out. I felt a flush of pride at his assessment. This was my work. Meaningful, important work that made real differences in people's lives. How had I ever allowed Tyler to diminish it? As Miguel left, promising to send a formal proposal by morning, Angela turned to me with raised eyebrows. That was impressive, Carrie. You may have just saved Riverside. It's what I do, I replied simply. Help people find homes. That night, as I settled into my new apartment, I received a text from an unknown number. My heart skipped, fearing it might be Tyler from a different phone. Instead, it was a photo of the local newspaper's business section. The headline read, Brooks & Sons executives face additional charges. Junior partner Tyler. Why? Brooks named in new indictment. The message below simply said, Thought you should know. Diane. I sat on my small sofa, staring at the image. According to the article, Tyler had been more involved in his father's fraudulent practices than initially believed. He wasn't just the son riding on his father's coattails. He was an active participant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the man I thought I had loved. Relief that I had escaped before being pulled into their web of deceit. I closed the message and looked around my tiny apartment. At the mismatched furniture and thrift store finds that nevertheless felt more like home than Tyler's sleek, impersonal condo ever had. This is enough, I whispered to myself. This is more than enough. A month passed. Savannah's summer heat settled over the city like a warm blanket, and my life fell into a new rhythm. I threw myself into the Riverside project, working closely with Miguel Jimenez and his team. The program director position was formally offered to me, with a modest but meaningful salary increase that allowed me to breathe a little easier financially. The Brooks? Scandal continued to unfold in the background of my life, like a television show I'd once been invested in but now watched with detached interest. Thomas had been released on bail, but Tyler surprisingly remained in custody. The paper speculated about internal family conflict, about deals made and betrayals executed. I forced myself not to care, until one evening in late July when a knock on my apartment door shattered my carefully constructed peace. I wasn't expecting anyone. Rachel was out of town for work, and Abby had a late class. Cautiously, I approached the door and peered through the peephole. Elizabeth Brooks stood in the hallway, her normally perfect appearance noticeably frayed around the edges. Tyler's mother, the woman who had spent our entire relationship subtly implying I wasn't good enough for her son, was now outside my door, clutching an expensive handbag with white knuckles. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity won out. Mrs. Brooks, I said evenly as I opened the door, not inviting her in. This is unexpected. Carrie. She nodded stiffly. May I come in? Please. It's important. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Elizabeth entered, her eyes sweeping across my small apartment with what looked like genuine surprise, rather than her usual condescension. It's lovely, she said softly. Very you. Thank you, I replied, unsure where this was heading. Would you like some tea? That would be nice. As I busied myself in the kitchenette, Elizabeth settled on my sofa, perched on the edge as though afraid to fully commit to sitting in such modest surroundings. The silence stretched between us, thick with unasked questions. Finally, with 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table between us, I broke the silence. Why are you here, Mrs. Brooks? She took a deep breath. I need your help, Carrie. Or more accurately, Tyler needs your help. I felt my expression harden. I think I've made it clear that Tyler and I are... He's being set up, she interrupted. By Thomas? By the company's CFO? They're making him take the fall for everything. I blinked, processing this. And you want me to... What, exactly? Speak to him. Visit him. He's not doing well, Carrie. He's asking for you. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. After everything he said to me? After how he treated me? You expect me to... Just forgive and forget because now he needs me? Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly. I know my son behaved abominably at the wedding. I was there, remember? I saw it all. And said nothing, I pointed out. Yes. She looked down, an admission that surprised me. I said nothing. I've been saying nothing for 30 years of marriage to Thomas Brooks. That's what we were taught to do. Stand by. Our husbands keep up appearances, never air the dirty laundry. For the first time, I saw Elizabeth not as Tyler's mother or Thomas's wife, but as a woman who had made her own compromises, who had perhaps sacrificed her voice for security long ago. Mrs. Brooks, I said gently, I'm sorry for what your family is going through. Truly. But I can't help Tyler. That chapter of my life is closed. She reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. Before you decide, there's something you should see. Tyler wrote this to you 2 weeks ago, but he wasn't allowed to send it. I obtained it. Reluctantly, I took the envelope. It was addressed simply to Carrie, in the handwriting I knew so well from birthday cards and grocery lists. I'll leave you to read it in private, Elizabeth said, rising. My number is on the back if you want to talk afterward. After she left, I sat holding the unopened letter, debating whether to read it or simply throw it away. Curiosity won again. Inside was a single page covered with Tyler's distinctive scrawl. Carrie, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I said at our wedding was unforgivable, but it wasn't even the worst of my sins. The truth is, I've been lying to you for years about who I am, about the company, about my involvement in my father's schemes. I told myself it was just business, that everyone cuts corners, that the people we hurt were just numbers on a balance sheet. But sitting in this cell, I finally see clearly. I see the families whose homes we built with substandard materials to increase our margins. I see the investors we defrauded. I see you, the one truly good thing in my life, and how I systematically tried to make you smaller to mask my own inadequacies. Dad wants me to take the fall. He has the connections to ensure I serve minimal time while he walks away untouched. Family loyalty, he calls it. But it's really just another Brooks man using someone else as a stepping stone. I won't do it. For once in my life, I'm standing up to him. They've offered me a deal to testify, and I'm taking it. Not for leniency, but because it's right. Finally doing something right feels strange, liberating. You taught me that, Carrie. Your integrity, your compassion. Even when I mocked your work, deep down I envied your purpose. You helped people. I just helped myself. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I just wanted you to know that you were right to walk away. You deserved better than what I could give you. You deserved better than who I was. Take care of yourself, Tyler. I read the letter 3 times, emotions washing over me in waves. Anger, vindication, confusion, and finally, a strange sense of peace. This wasn't a plea for reconciliation or help. It was perhaps for the first time in our relationship, complete honesty. The next day, I called Elizabeth. I read the letter, I told her, but I'm still not sure what you want from me. Tyler's hearing is tomorrow, she explained. The prosecutors have offered him a deal in exchange for testimony against Thomas and the others. His father's lawyers are pressuring him to refuse, to take the fall. He's wavering. And you? Think I can convince him to take the deal? I think seeing you, knowing that someone who once believed in him still thinks he can do the right thing, might give him the strength he needs. I closed my eyes, weighing my options. I had moved on. I was building a new life. Getting involved again, even peripherally, felt like a step backward. And yet, I'll come to the hearing, I finally said. Not for Tyler, for justice, for the families affected by what Brooks and Sons did. Elizabeth's relief was palpable even through the phone. Thank you, Carrie. The courthouse was crowded the next morning. Journalists, curious onlookers, and stern-faced business people who likely had connections to the case. I sat in the back, hoping to remain unnoticed. When Tyler was let in, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit, I barely recognized him. The confident, borderline arrogant man I'd known was gone, replaced by someone who looked both younger and older simultaneously, stripped of pretense, weighted by consequence. His eyes scanned the courtroom, landing briefly on his father in the front row, then continuing until they found me. The shock on his face was evident even from a distance. I gave him a small nod. Not forgiveness, not encouragement, just acknowledgement. I see you. I hear your truth. The proceedings moved quickly. The prosecution outlined the deal. reduced charges in exchange for comprehensive testimony against the primary architects of the fraud scheme. The defense requested time to confer with their client. As Tyler huddled with his lawyers, Thomas Brooks turned in his seat, his eyes finding mine with laser precision. His glare contained multitudes, anger, contempt, and something that might have been fear. He knew why I was there. When the judge called the court back to order, Tyler stood. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steadier than I expected, "I'd like to accept the prosecution's offer." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Thomas Brooks rose halfway out of his seat before his lawyer pulled him back down. "You understand the implications of your decision?" the judge asked Tyler. "Yes, Your Honor. I understand completely." As he was led away, Tyler glanced back at me one last time. There was no smile, no dramatic gesture, just a look of clarity, of a burden beginning to lift. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. I slipped away, unnoticed, walking back toward my office through Savannah's historic squares. The summer heat pressed down, but I felt lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane Fletcher. "You did a good thing today. Integrity matters." I didn't ask how she knew I'd been there. In Savannah, news traveled fast, especially when it involved the downfall of the mighty Brooks family. That evening, as I worked late at the office reviewing Riverside progress reports, Miguel Jimenez stopped by my desk. "I heard about the hearing," he said simply, placing a cup of coffee beside my keyboard. "You're a stronger person than most." I accepted the coffee with a grateful smile. "Not strong, just trying to do what's right, even when it's complicated." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The world needs more of that, especially in this industry." He hesitated, then added, "A few of us are having dinner later, just the project team, celebrating the foundation completion at Riverside. You should join us." The invitation felt significant somehow. Not just a casual dinner, but an acknowledgement that I belonged in this world I was building for myself, brick by brick. "I'd like that," I replied, realizing I genuinely meant it. The Riverside housing project became my salvation. As summer faded into fall, I poured everything into ensuring those 37 families would have homes before the holidays. Each early morning site visit, each late-night budget revision, each small victory against bureaucracy and setbacks, they all helped rebuild my confidence, my sense of purpose. Miguel and his team worked miracles with limited resources. Where other contractors might have cut corners to save money, Jimenez Construction found creative solutions that maintained quality while respecting our nonprofit budget. Miguel himself was often on site, sleeves rolled up, working alongside his crew when deadlines loomed. "My father built houses with his hands," he explained one afternoon as we inspected the newly installed windows. "He taught me that your name goes on every building you touch. You can't put your name on something you wouldn't live in yourself." I thought about the Brooks developments scattered across Savannah. Beautiful facades hiding substandard materials and fraudulent practices. A perfect metaphor for the family itself. I wish more builders thought that way, I said. "More will now," Miguel replied. "The Brooks case is changing things. Regulators are paying attention. Clients are asking questions they never asked before." He was right. The industry was shifting, partly due to the scandal and partly due to consumers demanding greater transparency. My professional knowledge had expanded dramatically as I worked alongside Miguel, learning the construction side of housing development in ways my previous role had never required. October brought a milestone. The first 6 units at Riverside were completed, ahead of our revised schedule. We held a small ceremony for the families receiving keys, and the local paper sent a reporter to cover the story. "Ms. Williams?" the young journalist asked after the ceremony. "Some are calling Riverside a phoenix project, rising from the ashes of the Brooks construction scandal. How does it feel to be part of that transformation?" I considered my answer carefully. The only transformation that matters is watching these families move from uncertainty to stability. That's why we do this work. And your personal connection to the Brooks case? Has that influenced your approach to this project? News of my almost marriage to Tyler had eventually become public knowledge, especially after his testimony against his father made headlines. "Every experience shapes us," I replied diplomatically. "I'm just grateful to be working with partners who share our commitment to honest, quality housing for all." Miguel, standing nearby, gave me an approving nod. The story ran the next day with a photo of me, handing keys to a young mother and her daughter. The headline read, "From Heartbreak to Hope, How One Woman is Rebuilding Lives and Homes in Savannah." Rachel texted me immediately. "Local celebrity status achieved? Does this mean you're too famous to help me move next weekend?" I laughed, texting back, I'll bring the famous moving mussels and pizza. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I found Abby waiting for me in the lobby. Surprise! She grinned, holding up a bottle of champagne. I thought we should celebrate your first media splash. We walked to the nearby square and sat on a bench, sipping champagne from paper cups like rebellious teenagers instead of women in our 20s and 30s. I'm proud of you, Abby said, bumping my shoulder with hers. Not just for Riverside, but for everything. For walking away when you needed to, for building something new. I had good examples, I replied, thinking of our mother who had rebuilt our family after our father left. And good support. I squeezed her hand. Have you heard anything more? About Tyler, I mean. I shook my head. Not directly. The papers say his testimony has been devastatingly thorough. Thomas's trial starts next month. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd gone through with it? The marriage? I looked up at the Spanish moss swaying gently in the oak trees above us, considering her question. Sometimes. But then I remember what he said at the reception, how he truly saw me, and I know I made the right choice. Even before you knew about the fraud stuff? Even before that. I confirmed. The fraud was just confirmation that my instincts were right. You can't build a life with someone who doesn't respect you, Abby, no matter how charming they seem or how good it looks on paper. She nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about what I want to do after I finish my degree. And what have you decided? I want to work with women, she said, decisively. Women leaving bad situations, needing to start over. Like you did, but maybe with fewer resources or options. Pride swelled in my chest. You'd be amazing at that. I had a good teacher. She grinned, raising her paper cup. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, I echoed, feeling the truth of it down to my bones. The following week brought an unexpected email from Elizabeth Brooks. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity, my perpetual weakness, prevailed. Carrie, I wanted to let you know that Tyler has been sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility, with the possibility of early release for continued cooperation. It's far less than he might have received without the deal. Thomas refuses to speak to either of us now. The divorce papers have been filed. After 30 years, I'm finally finding my own voice. I know we will likely never be close, but I wanted to thank you. Your presence at the hearing made a difference. Sometimes we need to see ourselves through the eyes of someone whose judgment we trust to find our way back to what's right. The enclosed check is not a bribe or an attempt to ease my conscience. It's restitution. The accountants have determined that Brooks & Sons defrauded your nonprofit on previous projects through inflated materials costs. Please use it for Riverside or any other project you deem worthy. With respect, Elizabeth attached was a check for $75,000 made out to our organization. I stared at it for a long time, conflicted about what to do. On one hand, it was money we desperately needed. On the other, it felt tainted somehow, connected to a past I was trying to leave behind. I took the check to Angela, explaining its origins. What do you think? Should we accept it? She studied the check, then me. Do you believe her? About it being restitution, not conscience money? I think I do, I said slowly. Elizabeth is changing, finding herself after decades in Thomas's shadow. Then I say, we take it and use it for good, Angela decided. That's what we do, isn't it? Take broken things and make them whole again. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. With the unexpected funds, we were able to add playground equipment to the Riverside community space and establish a small emergency fund for residents facing unexpected hardships. The project was coming together beautifully, ahead of schedule despite the early setbacks. One crisp November afternoon, as I supervised the installation of the playground equipment, I noticed Miguel watching me from across the site. He'd been doing that more often lately, observing me with a thoughtful expression when he thought I wasn't looking. It made me self-conscious, but not uncomfortably so. Penny for your thoughts? I asked, approaching him. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. I was just thinking that you missed your calling. You should have been a contractor. I laughed. Is that a job offer, Mr. Jimenez? Maybe it is, he replied, his tone shifting from teasing to sincere. My company's growing. The Brooks fallout has opened up opportunities for firms with clean records and ethical practices. I could use someone who understands both the business and human sides of housing. I stared at him, processing this unexpected turn. Are you serious? Completely. You have a gift, Carrie. You see buildings not just as structures, but as homes, as futures. That's rare in this industry. The offer was tempting, a completely new direction I hadn't considered. Higher pay, certainly. Different challenges. The chance to influence how homes were built from the ground up, not just how they were distributed. I'd need to think about it, I said honestly. This nonprofit, these people, they're family to me. Of course, he nodded. The offer stands whenever you're ready. No pressure. As he walked away, I realized something had shifted between us. A door opening to possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. Not just professionally, but perhaps personally as well. That night, I sat on my small balcony, watching the lights of Savannah flicker on as dusk settled over the city. 6 months ago, I had been preparing to become Mrs. Brooks, to step into a life I thought I wanted. Now, I was program director at a respected nonprofit with a job offer from a growing construction company, living in an apartment that was truly mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Forgot to mention, team dinner Thursday to celebrate Riverside progress. 7 p.m. at Savino's. Hope you can make it. I smiled, typing back. Wouldn't miss it. For the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open, full of possibilities that were entirely of my own making. Winter in Savannah is mild by most standards, but there's still a distinct chill in the air that December morning as I stood watching the final family receive their keys to their new Riverside home. Maria Diaz, a single mother of 3 who had escaped domestic violence 2 years earlier, wiped tears from her eyes as she unlocked the front door of her unit. I never thought I'd have a place like this, she whispered, her youngest daughter clinging to her leg. Somewhere safe, somewhere that's ours. I fought back my own tears. This was why I did this work. This moment, multiplied by 37 families, made every late night and difficult decision worthwhile. The Riverside project had been completed just in time for Christmas, a minor miracle given where we'd started. Local media covered the final move-ins, with several outlets noting the contrast between the Brooks construction scandal and what they were now calling the Riverside Renaissance. As the small crowd dispersed and the new residents began settling into their homes, Miguel approached, 2 cups of coffee in hand. For the woman of the hour, he said, offering me one. Hardly, I demurred. This was a team effort. A team you helped hold together when everything was falling apart, he reminded me. Don't downplay your role, Carrie. You've earned this victory. We walked together around the perimeter of the development, admiring the finished product. Modern, efficient units arranged around a central green space with the new playground at its heart. Christmas lights already twinkled from several windows, and children tested out the swings despite the cool weather. Have you thought more about my offer? Miguel asked as we completed our circuit. I had thought about little else, if I was being honest. The prospect of joining Jimenez Construction had grown more appealing the more I considered it. I'd even had lunch with Diane Fletcher to discuss the opportunity, and she'd been surprisingly supportive. The nonprofit will always need advocates like you, she'd said, but sometimes you can create more change from within the industry itself. I told Miguel now. I'm interested, but I have conditions. His eyes crinkled with amusement. I expected nothing less. Let's hear them. I want to create a new division within the company, I explained, focused specifically on affordable housing projects, not just as side work or charity, but as a core business unit with its own targets and resources. Miguel nodded thoughtfully. It's not the most profitable sector, but it could be sustainable, I countered, with the right approach, the right partnerships, and it would differentiate Jimenez Construction in the market. Social responsibility is becoming a business advantage, not just a nice-to-have. What else? I want to finish what I started here at the nonprofit. See the current projects through, train my replacement properly. That would mean starting with you part-time for at least 3 months. He considered this, sipping his coffee. Reasonable. Anything else? I hesitated, then decided to be completely transparent. If we're going to work together, I need to know where we stand personally. These past few months, I've felt something shifting between us. But I've just come out of a very complicated situation, and you're potentially my boss, and… Carrie, he interrupted gently. I would never be your boss. Partner, yes. Colleague, certainly. But not your boss. That doesn't address the personal aspect, I pointed out. Miguel smiled, warm and genuine. No, it doesn't. The truth is, I admire you, professionally and personally. I've enjoyed getting to know you these past months. And yes, I would like to explore what might be possible between us beyond work. But I sensed there was more. But I also respect that you're rebuilding your life after a difficult experience. I'm in no rush. Whatever happens between us, if anything happens, should develop naturally, without pressure. The knot of tension in my chest loosened. This was exactly what I needed to hear. Acknowledgement of the attraction between us, but also respect for my circumstances. No demands, no timeline. Thank you for understanding, I said softly. So do we have a deal? He extended his hand formally, but his eyes were playful. Professional partners for now, with the future open to additional negotiations? Laughed and shook his hand. Deal. The team dinner at Savino's that Thursday became an impromptu celebration of both Riverside's completion and my new role with Jimena's construction. Angela was there, along with the core nonprofit team, all genuinely happy for my new opportunity, while extracting promises that I wouldn't abandon them completely. You'd better still consult on the Wilson Street I project, Marcus warned good-naturedly. I'm not facing the zoning board alone. Wouldn't dream of it, I assured him. Rachel arrived late, flushed with excitement that had nothing to do with my career news. Sorry I'm late, she announced, sliding into the empty seat beside me. I was finalizing the gallery space for next month's showcase. Her photography business had taken off in recent months, partly due to her documentation of the Riverside project from start to finish. The photo essay had caught the attention of a prominent arts publication, leading to a feature and now her first solo exhibition. That's amazing, Rach. I hugged her tightly. We need to toast to that too. As the evening progressed, I found myself observing the people around the table, colleagues who had become friends who had become family. A year ago, I had been planning a wedding to a man whose friends had never felt like mine, whose world had always held me at arm's length. Now I was surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. Miguel caught my eye from across the table and raised his glass slightly in a private toast. I returned the gesture, feeling a quiet happiness settle over me. Not the giddy excitement of my engagement to Tyler, but something steadier, more grounded, more real. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find a familiar figure waiting in the lobby. Abby sat nervously, clutching a folder to her chest. What's this surprise visit? I asked, hugging her. I have something to show you, she said, following me to my office. Once the door closed, behind us, she placed the folder on my desk. It's my final project for my social work degree. I wanted you to see it first. Inside was a comprehensive proposal for a support program for women transitioning out of difficult situations. Domestic violence, homelessness, financial hardship. The program would include housing assistance, job training, and emotional support, all structured as a pathway to independence rather than perpetual aid. Abby, this is incredible, I said, genuinely impressed by the thoroughness and insight of her work. You've really thought this through. She beamed with pride. I was wondering if there might be a place for something like this at Riverside? A small pilot program, maybe? The community space could host workshops, and with the families already there as a support network. It's perfect, I agreed immediately. And the timing couldn't be better. With me transitioning to Jimenez, there's going to be a gap in program development here. This could be exactly what Angela is looking for. Really? Abby's eyes widened. You think she might consider it? Consider me? I think we should go talk to her right now, I said, standing and gathering the folder. This is too good to wait. 2 hours later, Abby walked out of Angela's office with a tentative offer to develop her program as an internship initially, with the possibility of a full-time position upon her graduation in May. She practically floated down the hallway, her face alight with excitement. I can't believe this is happening, she breathed as we celebrated with coffee from the shop downstairs. This is everything I've been working toward. You earned it, I told her firmly. This was all you, Abby. Your idea, your work, your passion. She shook her head. No, not all me. You showed me it was possible, Carrie. You walked away from something that looked perfect on the outside but wasn't right for you. You rebuilt from scratch. You taught me that it's never too late to change direction. Her words touched me deeply. I had never thought of myself as a role model for my younger sister. If anything, I'd worried that my broken engagement had set a negative example. To hear that my choices had actually inspired her was profoundly moving. As Christmas approached, I divided my time between wrapping up projects at the nonprofit and setting up the new affordable housing division at Jimenez Construction. Miguel had given me a small office at their headquarters and the freedom to structure the division as I saw fit, with the promise of a dedicated team once we secured our first projects. The work was challenging and exciting, requiring me to stretch in new directions while drawing on everything I'd learned at the nonprofit. I found myself thriving in the hybrid role, bringing nonprofit values into the corporate space and corporate efficiency back to the nonprofit projects I was still consulting on. On the personal front, Miguel and I were taking things slowly, as promised. We'd shared a few dinners that had nothing to do with work, gradually getting to know each other beyond Riverside and construction contracts. I learned about his family in Puerto Rico, about his journey to founding his own company after years working for others, about his passion for restoring historic homes in his spare time. In turn, I told him about growing up with a single mother who worked multiple jobs to keep us afloat, about losing her to cancer 5 years ago, about my early determination to help others secure the stable housing my own family had sometimes struggled to maintain. "You never talk about your father," he observed one evening as we walked along the riverfront after dinner. "Not much to say," I replied with a shrug that didn't quite achieve the casualness I aimed for. "He left when I was 12. Abby was 6, sent birthday cards for a couple years, then nothing. That must have been difficult. It was harder on my mom, I think. She never really trusted anyone after that. Never dated. Never let anyone new into our lives." I paused, realizing something for the first time. Maybe that's why I held on to Tyler for so long, even when things weren't right. I was afraid of ending up alone, like she did. Miguel took my hand gently. "There's a difference between being alone and choosing solitude until the right person comes along." "Is that what you did?" I asked, curious about his past. "Something like that," he smiled. "I was married once, very young. It ended after 2 years. After that, I decided to focus on building my business. I dated, but never seriously. Until, I prompted when he hesitated. "Until I met someone who made me reconsider what I wanted for my future," he finished simply, his eyes meeting mine with quiet intensity. We stood there by the river, the weight of possibilities between us, neither rushing to define what was developing, but both acknowledging its potential. That night, as I got ready for bed in my small apartment, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and paused. There was a steadiness in my gaze that hadn't been there a year ago, a quiet confidence that came from weathering storms and finding my own path. I looked like someone who knew her worth, not because of who loved her or what she owned, but because of the integrity with which she lived her life. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace with where I was and where I was heading. The humiliation of my almost wedding day had faded to a distant memory, a painful but necessary step on the journey to becoming who I was meant to be. I fell asleep thinking not of what I had lost, but of all I had found in its place. Spring in Savannah is nothing short of magical. The azaleas burst into vibrant bloom. The squares fill with music and laughter, and the city seems to collectively emerge from winter with renewed spirit. As March gave way to April, I found myself caught up in the season's energy, moving forward with purpose on multiple fronts. At Jimenez Construction, our affordable housing division had secured its first 2 projects: a renovation of an old school building into senior apartments and a small development of family homes on the city's west side. I had hired a small but dedicated team, including Marcus from the nonprofit, who had jumped at the chance to expand his impact. My transition from the nonprofit had been smoother than expected, with Angela finding an experienced replacement while keeping me on as a consultant for specific projects. Abby's internship program was flourishing, with 5 women already enrolled in her support system and showing promising progress. And then there was Miguel. Our relationship had developed naturally, over the months, progressing from professional respect to friendship to something deeper. We still maintained clear boundaries at work, but evenings and weekends were increasingly spent together, trying new restaurants, working on the small house he was renovating in the historic district, or simply talking for hours on my balcony. "Have you seen this?" Rachel asked one Saturday morning as we browsed the farmer's market downtown. She handed me her phone, open to a local news site. The headline made me freeze mid-step. "Brooks trial concludes. Thomas Brooks sentenced to 12 years. The article detailed the conclusion of the lengthy trial, with Thomas ultimately convicted on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Several other executives had received lesser sentences. The piece also mentioned that Tyler Brooks, son of the defendant and a key witness for the prosecution, is currently serving an 18-month sentence at a minimum security facility. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, watching my face closely. I handed back her phone. "Yes, actually, it feels final, like the last chapter of that part of my life is closed." "Good riddance," she declared, linking her arm through mine as we continued walking. "Now, help me pick out flowers for the gallery opening." I'm thinking something dramatic but not ostentatious. Rachel's photography exhibition was opening the following weekend, featuring her Riverside documentation alongside other projects focused on community transformation. The gallery had been booked for months, and anticipation was building with several local publications planning to cover the event. The opening night arrived with perfect spring weather, the gallery filled with Savannah's art community and supporters of Rachel's work. I stood proudly beside Abby as Rachel gave a brief speech about her inspiration for the exhibition. I wanted to capture moments of change, she explained, gesturing to the large photographs lining the walls. Not just physical transformations of spaces, but the human moments when lives shift direction, when people find home, find purpose, find themselves. Her eyes found mine in the crowd, and I knew she was partly referring to my journey. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a triptych of Riverside, the abandoned industrial site it had been, the construction process with workers and community members collaborating, and finally, children playing on the new playground as families gathered on porches. Hope, in visual form. As guests circulated through the gallery, I found myself drawn to a smaller series tucked in an alcove. These photos weren't of buildings or communities, but of individuals. Close-up portraits capturing raw emotion. One in particular stopped me cold. A woman sitting on a park bench looking out over Forsyth Park, her profile illuminated by golden afternoon light. It took me a moment to recognize myself. I took that the week after the wedding, Rachel said quietly, appearing beside me. You didn't know I was photographing you. You were thinking about what to do next, whether to file the marriage certificate. I studied the image, the tension in my shoulders, the uncertainty in my expression, but also a determination in the set of my jaw. A woman at a crossroads. And this one, Rachel continued, pointing to the adjacent photo of me at the Riverside opening ceremony. I took 6 months later. Notice the difference? The contrast was striking. In the second photo, I was smiling, confident, surrounded by the community I'd helped create. My posture was open, my eyes clear. I call the series Becoming, Rachel explained. It's about the journey from who we think we should be to who we truly are. I hugged her tightly, too moved for words. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, Miguel found me still studying the photographs. Powerful work, he commented, slipping his arm around my waist. Rachel has a gift for capturing truth. She does, I agreed, leaning slightly into his embrace. It's strange seeing yourself through someone else's eyes. Makes you realize how much you've changed without even noticing. I would have liked to know you then, he said thoughtfully, but I'm grateful to know you now. Even with all the baggage? I asked, only half joking. Especially with the baggage, he replied seriously. It shaped you into who you are. And who you are is extraordinary, Carrie Williams. His words warmed me from within, all the more meaningful because I knew he meant them. With Miguel, there had never been pretense or performance, just genuine appreciation for each other's true selves. As April turned to May, life continued its forward momentum. Abby graduated with honors, accepting a full-time position at the nonprofit to continue developing her support program. I settled fully into my role at Jimenez Construction, finding unexpected satisfaction in combining business acumen with social purpose. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, a letter arrived at my office. The return address was from a federal correctional institution in Georgia. My heart stuttered as I recognized Tyler's handwriting. For a long moment, I simply held the envelope, debating whether to open it or throw it away. Curiosity won out, as it so often did with me. Carrie, I heard you're doing well. My mother mentions you sometimes in her letters. Your work at Riverside, your new position with Jimenez Construction. I'm glad. I'll be released next month, earlier than expected due to good behavior and continued cooperation. I wanted you to hear it from me rather than through gossip or news reports. I have no intention of interfering in your life. I'll be moving to Atlanta after release, starting over far from Savannah and the Brooks name. Dad's empire is gone, the company assets sold to pay restitution. It's better this way. I'm writing simply to say thank you. Your presence at that hearing last year gave me the courage to finally stand up to my father, to choose integrity over family loyalty. It may sound strange, but the greatest gift you ever gave me was walking away when you did. You forced me to face who I truly was and who I wanted to become. I hope you've found happiness. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Tyler. I read the letter twice, searching for hidden agendas or manipulations, but found none. It seemed genuinely reflective, the words of someone who had used his time in confinement for introspection. That evening, I showed the letter to Miguel as we sat on the porch of the house he was renovating, a beautiful Victorian that was gradually transforming under his skilled hands. "What are you thinking?" he asked after reading it. I considered the question carefully. "I'm thinking that people can change if they want to badly enough, and I'm hoping he really has." "Are you worried about him returning to Savannah?" "No," I said, realizing it was true. "That chapter is closed for both of us. I wish him well in Atlanta, but our paths don't need to cross again." Miguel nodded, returning the letter. "You have a generous spirit, Carrie. Not everyone could wish well to someone who hurt them so publicly." "Holding on to anger only weighs you down," I replied, thinking of my mother's words after my father left. "At some point, you have to set it down and walk on lighter." The following weekend, Miguel invited me to see the nearly completed renovation. The house had been transformed from a neglected shell to a warm, inviting home, with original features lovingly restored alongside thoughtful modern updates. "It's beautiful," I said as we stood in the sun-drenched kitchen. "Someone's going to love living here." "I was hoping that someone might be us," Miguel said quietly. I turned to him, startled. "What?" He took my hands in his, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I bought this house 6 months ago, right around the time I offered you the job. I know it's fast, and I've tried to be patient, to give you time and space. But I love you, Carrie. I love your compassion, your determination, your integrity. I love the way you see potential in broken things and work tirelessly to realize it." My heart raced as he continued. "I'm not proposing marriage. Not yet. That should come later, when you're ready. But I am proposing a beginning. Move in with me. Help make this house a home. Build a life with me, at whatever pace feels right to you." Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness or confusion, but from overwhelming certainty. This felt nothing like my whirlwind romance with Tyler. No public spectacle, no external validation, just the quiet rightness of two people who truly saw and valued each other. "Yes," I said simply. "Yes to beginning. Yes to building something real. Together." His smile could have lit the entire house as he pulled me into his arms. June arrived with warm breezes and the promise of summer. On a perfect Saturday morning, we held a housewarming party at our new home. Rachel and Abby helped me arrange flowers and food, while Miguel gave tours of the renovation to admiring friends and colleagues. As I watched our communities blend, my nonprofit, friends chatting with his construction crew, Abby's program participants mingling with Riverside residents who had come to celebrate, I felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, but a harmonious convergence of all the separate threads of my life. Diane Fletcher arrived fashionably late, bearing an antique doorstop as a housewarming gift. "For keeping doors open," she explained with a wink. As the party wound down and guests departed, I found myself alone on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Miguel joined me, handing me a glass of wine. "Happy?" he asked, sitting beside me on the porch swing. "Completely," I replied, resting my head on his shoulder. "You know, a year ago, I thought my life was falling apart. I was humiliated, homeless, heartbroken. And now?" I gestured to the beautiful home behind us, to the garden we'd planted together, to the porch where we'd someday rock and watch our children play. Now I know it wasn't falling apart. It was falling into place. Miguel's arm tightened around me as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "To falling into place," he toasted, clinking his glass gently against mine. "And to the home we build together," I added. "Not just this house, but what we create with our lives, our work, our love." As twilight settled over Savannah, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from public humiliation to private joy, from borrowed security to earned confidence. I had lost what I thought I wanted and found what I truly needed, the dress that smelled of roses and champagne was long gone, donated months ago to a women's shelter. In its place was the simple sundress I wore now, comfortable and entirely my own. The woman who had stood frozen at that reception, wounded by cruel words, had transformed into someone stronger, wiser, more authentically herself. I hadn't just survived the collapse of my planned life. I had rebuilt something far more beautiful from its ruins. Something with a foundation strong enough to weather any storm, because it was built on truth, respect, and love freely given, not measured or withheld. As night fell completely, Miguel and I went inside, closing the door on the past and stepping fully into the future we were creating together.